Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Malcolm Renfrew Interdisciplinary Colloquium for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. If my math is correct, we are kicking off our 42nd semester of interdisciplinary presentations featuring faculty, graduate students, postdocs, visiting scholars, all talking about their scholarship, their creative activity, their teaching, and outreach and extension activities. And before introducing today's speaker, I wanted to give a brief welcome to my co-coordinator, Dan Buckfitch, who you may see in the upper left of your screen or next to me. And I'll tell you just a little bit about how and when this series was founded and what it represents. So as those of you who attended our presentation last fall, we began on 9/11/01, and we had Professor Dan Buckfitch, Professor Michael O'Rourke pictured on the right of this picture, and in the center is Malcolm M. Renfrew, scientist, musician, artist, in many ways, the intellectual underpinning of this weekly series. And the colloquium was named in his honor on his 100th birthday in October of 2010. And if you are new to our series, you can sign up for a weekly announcement on our page, which is uidaho.edu/class/MRIC or MRIC. And there's a place on that page to receive a weekly newsletter that will give you the biography and the abstract of the program, usually sent on Thursday or Friday preceding the Tuesday presentations. And we've got a great series in place this semester. Our intent is for the first half of the semester to meet on Zoom. For the second half of the semester, we will be doing some field trips and in-person meetings if conditions allow on campus. The colloquium is also a one-credit pass-fail upper division course called INTR 450, and students are welcome to encourage. We have 4 students enrolled now and hope to have double that number by the end of this week. You can register online through the end of the day on Thursday. And I'd like to invite the current students who are already enrolled to just remain in the Zoom room after the seminar concludes today. Next week, we will hear from the first of 3 postdoctoral fellows in the College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences. Joe Feldman, affiliated with the Martin Institute, will speak about populism, progressive elites, and the notion of the caviar left in Peru. The subject of his research on that part of South America. Hope you will join us on January. Idaho, Doc Alessa, who is a President's Professor. She is co-director of the Center for Resilient Communities in the College of Art and Architecture. And I won't give you her full biography, but the audience will be interested to know she has over 25 years of experience working across academic, federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial partners in Canada and the United States, focused on national security, defense, and resilience of systems, people, and communities. And that is a recipe for the kind of interdisciplinary presentation that we're so appreciative of. And our topic today is Defending the Homeland, a new partnership for peace and security. Please welcome Doc Alessa.
Thanks, Kenton. I really appreciate the introduction. So before we jump into this, I'm going to go very quickly, and I welcome questions and discussions afterward. Also, feel free to contact me anytime if you want to unpack any of this. So what I'm about to offer is based on experience, not so much on theory. Having built the theory of resilience and working in an area which is in the College of Art and Architecture, which is really, in my opinion, at the frontier of where our nation needs to go in terms of thinking about how we design resilience for our nation. That's the preamble of jumping immediately into the talk. So I am going to ask for that first slide to be launched. As we go into this, we're going to talk about academia, but I want to be very clear. We are talking about a very specific type of academia. It is our type of academia. So when I say academia going forward in this talk, I am not talking about all universities across the United States. I'm being very specific about the kind of land-grant universities that occupy a specific geography, a specific niche in space and time, and have specific kinds of programs of which many of you may not be aware. The College of Art and Architecture is few and far between in the country. When we talk about Homeland Security, probably the first thing you think of are some of the desperate images of the negative side of it. Men and women in guns at the border, herding frightened individuals into some kind of cell, or it may be of people standing and defending with guns. Whatever those images are, Homeland Security is really broad. It simply refers to the defense of the homeland for the protection of the values that constitute our democratic basis. So Homeland Security may apply to natural resources, it may apply to communities' infrastructure, it may even apply to ensuring that our transportation systems are designed in such a way that they can withstand the dynamics of climate change and other changes. Science must lead, but not in the ways you might think. When we think of science and Homeland Security or science and defense, we often think of the widgets and gadgets that engineering often generates, or we think of things. It could be, something that is tangible and touched. But really, science has to lead more in actually framing what Homeland Security and defense constitutes. Peace and security are truly not free, and they do require trade-offs. For peace, sometimes trade-offs that constitute less desirable tactics need to be undertaken, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So the land-grant colleges and universities, you will see there was sort of a wave that moved westward, obviously. And we are looking at this ellipse kind of angled this way. But next slide, please. What we really want to focus on is this area right here. And as you can see, thinking about the land-grant universities, thinking about the universities of our type. These are the mid-size universities that occupy a very rare geography and also have a footprint that is also very rare because of the diversity of landscapes and cultures that it covers. This area here is forgotten by the Homeland Security enterprise. And I pretty much stand by those words. There is very little in an area that constitutes the nation's future. So why is this? And this reference right here, the most militarized universities, these are universities and institutions that receive the lion's share of defense funding or the intelligence community's funding, as well as have programs that link very tightly to them. So it's not that they have programs that are militarizing schools, but rather that they have the lion's share. Next slide, please. So the pluralities of meaning of Homeland Security, and sadly, the weaponization of the term, is something that is doing all of us a disservice. We really have to ask, what are we protecting? And quite often it devolves into politics. This is why I say science must lead. We have to take objective views and ask the difficult questions. What are we protecting? What are the trade-offs of that security? And why aren't we having these more difficult dialogues? And the reason quite often is because it's too easy to slip into politics or into international affairs or prognostications on, what history tells us and how history drives where we're going. Science is really absent. The voice of science, the voice of design is really absent in the dialogue of what does it mean to protect the homeland. This is something that we can remedy. We, being the kinds of universities that the University of Idaho are, is that we can bring in a diversity of perspective, of context, and of situation to these dialogues. So the DoD, Defense and Security, they really do have a diversity problem well beyond the fact that there are very few of us. For example, a woman of color, there are very few of us in the enterprise writ large. But putting all that aside, the diversity problem comes from using the same universities, the same people, the same geographical biases. So we sometimes joke about the Bank of DoD, endless pockets, or the Beltway bandits, or the Beltway bias, where everything is concentrated into the usual suspects all the time. The consequence is that we have the same frameworks, the same ideas, and the same so-called technological solutions. They are not moving us forward in the ways we need. So this has dulled our security enterprise and heightened what we call the drifting delta problem. So we'll get into that into a minute. If we can cue the video. What we're going to do is walk through a video that 424 partners, collaborators, colleagues from across academia, the private, the public sector.
It's a cliche,
worked on this.
but our world is constantly changing. It is changing faster than we can adapt. Our data ecosystems are evolving and growing at an almost incomprehensible speed. So quickly that we are simply unable to make sense of things. We are challenged by trying to turn that data into information, let alone information into knowledge or knowledge into wisdom. Our adversaries understand this and are using it to their advantage, hiding in the gaps and seams of our complex and complicated social, political, and institutional structures, often in plain sight, committing acts both licit and illicit, but undetected and contrary to our national interests. Shielded by the sheer amount of data, weak signals overwhelmed by volume, our intelligence, security, and defense organizations are drowning in data and grasping for understanding. Our ability to detect, respond to, and predict threats is also challenged by issues within the intelligence, defense, and law enforcement communities.
So next slide, please. So the drifting delta problem is a phenomenon that I worked over the past 2 years with physicists, mathematicians, psychologists, political scientists, and several other individuals. It's actually born out of a set of capabilities that the Center for Resilient Communities has built, and that is future scenarios. The ability to look into the future, not prognosticate and not predict, but rather forecast a range of scenarios, is something we desperately need to do better. The drifting delta problem, in a nutshell, means that if you anticipate incorrectly and not base it on data, and you plan for that anticipation and it is incorrect, then your planning is so far off base that should that future unfold rather, when it does unfold, all your planning will essentially be maladaptive. So currently on our trajectory with the diversity problem that we have in our security and defense enterprise, we are creating a very large divergence or a large delta. And the drifting delta problem, if not fixed, means our nation is less resilient. Next slide, please. So what is a threat? So threats are typically construed as nefarious actors, and we even put it in the video, guys walking around trying to do something, hurt someone or something. But really, it is about anything that destabilizes resilience or puts a system, whether it be our communities or our regions, our states, our country, on a path that is an undesired path. It can be everything from food, energy, and water, from well-being, from access to desired goods, services, and peoples. It can be the freedom to express cultures, beliefs, values. It could be a threat to equity and autonomy. And there are lots and lots of examples of what threats are. The goal really is to detect threats to the homeland as a system. And it's to understand with precision, what are the 5 W's and the H? You're all familiar with these. What, when, where, why, and how. Our ability to do this for the homeland, to defend the homeland, everything from being able to deploy a sortie to get reconnaissance, or to protect the infrastructure that brings water to schools, is currently based on somewhat maladaptive frameworks. Academia, as we defined it earlier, remember that empty part of the map. I am talking about this type of academia. As we defined it earlier, can lead by helping defense and security agencies think differently, using a systems approach, using more diversity in terms of how we approach and build those frameworks, because the ones we're currently using have a increasingly lower return on investment. So if we could go back to the video, please.
Issues that have their roots in the very foundations of how we address intelligence and analysis. We use old methods and target the wrong data using processes based, but never fully realized, on the philosophies of Sherman Kent. Kent is considered by some to be a founding father of Allied intelligence analysis during World War II and the Cold War. Kent created an analytic framework that relies entirely upon the professional acumen of the analyst. He never foresaw the current information age, in which analysts are overwhelmed by data both classified and unclassified, or the explosion of open source information, or that the IC workforce might devolve from a small, agile professional group into a large, complicated, and stovepiped bureaucracy. Unlike during the Cold War, when we generally had the luxury of time and a limited data ecosystem, today, the relentless flow of data is like an ocean wave. It overwhelms us. The fast pace of today's data environment means we need a fundamental change in how we collect, evaluate, and disseminate data and information. One where machines augment analysts and accelerate the process of converting information into knowledge. One in which data and analysis sharing is intrinsic. Our current intelligence process is based on a system known as the intelligence cycle. The cycle begins with planning and direction, proceeds through collection, into processing and exploitation, then into analysis and production, and finally into dissemination and integration. In theory, all phases are accompanied by evaluation and feedback. There are at least 3 flaws with this approach. First, while it begins with planning and direction, current doctrine does not account for a wide range of inputs into what is needed. Second, the step-by-step nature of the cycle means that it is cumbersome. Every step must be accomplished in series. Third, it is mission-centric. So unless a specific threat is identified, the cycle will never address it. This means that the intelligence cycle will only find hidden patterns of activity if there is enough signal to catch the enterprise's attention. Put another way, under the current intelligence cycle, we will always focus on data that rises above a threshold, and miss much of the data that might be of interest were it collected and aggregated. The weak signals. It is these weak signals that, when found, shine a flashlight into dark spaces where our adversaries are operating. And they can be detected, pulled out of the noisy environment and highlighted for human awareness. By applying systems science, a discipline that didn't exist when our current approaches were born, we can identify common traits, proximities, and relationships between data. By using modern computational technologies, we can even do this at speed, in and across large data pools, provided we always keep the human in the loop and use the right framework.
So the idea of using the right framework and keeping the human in the loop may seem antithesis to the whole technological advancement idea that technology will somehow bring us solutions. But ultimately, humans have to be core to how we construct Homeland Security. So many years ago, well, actually not that many years ago, I and 10 other authors produced a blueprint for America's future, which was on environmental research and education for a thriving century. We also produced, with colleagues, best practices for integrating the social sciences. Because we've used frameworks that were built from a kinetic conflict, the world wars, the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. These were things that required a lot of hardware, a lot of widgets, a lot of gadgets, a lot of stuff. But the world we're entering in now is very gray. There is very little black and white in it. So when we talk about adversaries and threats, an adversary may be something as simple as complacency when it comes to ensuring security in our food systems. The idea of bringing social sciences into the Homeland and Defense enterprise is something that we have been able to bring back only about a year ago. So we are working with colleagues at the DoD, outstanding individuals who recognize the need for not only the social sciences, but also resilient design into the way we construct and frame our ability to detect threats. Think about that map again, and think about the fact that with the intelligence cycle, and you can be talking about law enforcement intelligence or environmental intelligence, it doesn't matter. Intelligence is really just knowledge about something. The idea of decentralizing that, of having us lead the way in that empty oval you saw, is really, really critical to diversifying and enhancing our ability to defend the homeland. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? How do we bring all these disparate things in? Well, again, with several colleagues and led by the Center for Resilient Communities, we built a process to get feedback from operators. An operator can be somebody who uses a GIS-enabled tractor, or it could be a soldier on the ground. Operators are simply those people who practice in the field, on the ground. They are operational. In academia, we often say, well, we'll include the operator. We'll get a bit of feedback on that, but we don't engage them at the beginning. We do our science, and they do their practice. And at some point, we'll try and figure out if there's something in that gray area that may mesh. We built this process called the QED, which is a quadrant-enabled Delphi. It was adopted by the Russian Academy of Sciences as of just a few months ago. And that was pretty interesting. So we know it works. It's generated several reports, and we're very excited about it because it's not a widget or a gadget. It's a process that engages humans and keeps them at the center of that loop. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to get into this a lot. We've also built frameworks that talk about different kinds of geographies. So on this slide, you will see that quite often we are biased toward two ends, either type 1A, urban, and this is that beltway bias, or all the way to the type 3C, 3 Charlie, which is rural indigenous communities. But in between there, there is this big forgotten space. And those are the spaces upon which our nation hinges. Interestingly, and very conveniently, those are also the spaces that academia, like institutions like ours, serve. That is a gap we need to fill. Next slide, please. So I won't get into this. We've also built the idea of community-based observatories, or observing from the ground up, where people can observe changes in their environment and say, hey, because we live here, because we are so intimate with this place, I really think you should pay attention to these changes. Here are the 5 W's and here's the how. Those kinds of observatories are things we're trying to get more into the dialogue, and they're absolutely critical. So the idea of local place-based knowledge, that wealth, which is, it's a commodity, we all have it, but that empty oval has it. It is the last bits left in the nation because we are home to communities, indigenous communities, rural communities, communities that have been essentially wiped off the map through globalization and modernization. Next slide, please. So academia can help ask the right questions. We've focused too long on traditional threats. The world has become grayer. Climate, perceptions, teleconnections, even the autonomy we have are things that need to be considered. So this requires us to lead the enterprise in the dialogue. If we wait for them to come to us to lead the dialogue, it will not happen because of those biases. So let's go to the next part of the video. And the idea of local and place-based knowledge is not race-based. It is place-based. It just so happens that our indigenous communities happen to have the lion's share of it. And apologies for the video, it's not.
So the question becomes how to take the massive amounts of data that are available in multiple data ecosystems and find the right information to both answer questions and to detect patterns previously unseen. Doing so requires a new framework. One in which stakeholders and subject experts are engaged throughout the process, especially its beginning, where expertise from all levels, field operators, analysts, policymakers, leadership, specific subject experts, etc., identify key indicators and weight them. Using a method known as the quadrant-enabled Delphi, or QED, expert input is elicited using sound cognitive science and human organizational principles. QED encompasses the entire plurality and diversity of the enterprise. It includes the outliers, which sometimes give us indicators of so-called black swans. And it avoids stovepipes where politics, opinions, and analysts' favorite topics drive the cycle. This ensures that the human is not only in the loop, but driving the process. The experts, the rule managers, are also used to identify the data ecosystems. Who better to tell us what data sources are available, what data would help, and where it resides? The rule managers also help in scenario development, where specific emerging threats and associated collection needs are identified. The stakeholder, partner, and expert engagement is an ongoing, bidirectional process to ensure evolving issues are addressed, as they're identified, either through targeted analytics or through hidden pattern recognition. This enables developing algorithm rule sets, including fitness functions, allowing us to use genetic algorithms and machine learning to improve the algorithms as they evolve. Once the data sources, algorithm rule sets, and scenarios of interest are identified, we code to execute the algorithms. Written in any appropriate language and taking advantage of parallel processing, deployment is platform neutral. Using genetic algorithms and machine learning, the algorithms are able to identify significant correlations that not only match identified threats and scenarios, but also, and more powerfully, previously unseen correlations. In simple terms, many little signals previously lost in the noise, and which may not appear to be related, can be correlated. Closing the circle, the patterns are visualized, providing an output that is readily and rapidly understandable. Visualization not only enables users to see answers to questions and hidden patterns, it also helps them guide the machine in determining what is important and what is not, creating a circle in which the algorithms themselves evolve to provide improved answers and better detect what is hiding in plain sight. The Strategic Intelligence Framework was developed over a 5-year period and involved more than 400 highly experienced experts.
Okay, so the idea of changing the frameworks is not a massive change. It doesn't mean a radical departure from anything. What it is simply ensuring that we don't forget humans in the process of artificial intelligence or machine learning. At no point will we be able to replicate a human despite the idea of automating information. So the takeaway from that is that data analysis, data methods, they're relatively ubiquitous and they actually equalize very quickly. So maths themselves, they tend to be very stable, which is brilliant and wonderful. You don't have to use any particular kind to get to the end, but you do have to use the appropriate analysis. Really at the core, and if you take nothing away from today, it's about asking the right questions with the most appropriate rule managers. It is that as a crux that allows you to use the most adaptive analytic framework. So where do we fit in? Well, we need to lead the dialogue. We need to show that diversifying the approaches and evolving the framework is necessary. The idea of fail fast and fail often is a thing of the past. We are running out of time. We're running out of ecosystems that are stable. And ultimately, we will run into money. We will run out of money. Debt can only go on so far. Building better scenarios improves our nation's resilience, period. So getting to those better scenarios means we need a more adaptive framework. Next slide, please. So I had mentioned that the process of the quadrant-enabled Delphi was adopted by the Russian Academies of Science. And if anybody is interested in the paper, it was quite a surprise to all of us. But it means that we, here at the University of Idaho, created a capability that is being rapidly picked up by other parts of the world and some of the best minds in the world. Next slide, please. So scenarios, I won't get into this very much. Remember that drifting delta problem? Our goal is really to close that delta, to close the gap, so that the scenarios we generate, that we put up, are as precise as possible, because then we can walk into the future with more confidence, not certainty, but confidence. Next slide, please. So here's some recommendations, and then we'll go to the end of the video. The first adaptation is to focus those vast amounts of data. I cannot begin to tell you how much information the defense, security, enterprise has to deal with now. But if you leverage local and place-based knowledge, and if you decentralize the idea that one size fits all, you can actually figure out which data and information are most important. And from there, you can accelerate your ability to do the analysis that will get you to the precise scenarios. We need to understand better those coupled gray spaces, those coupled social, ecological, and technological systems, instead of just widgets and gadgets in black and white. Widgets and gadgets are not going to get us to where we need to go. If anything, it may create more problems than they solve. And we must invest in the social sciences as augmented by machines. When we talk about AI and machine learning, we jump into this world where there's this magic that happens. It does not exist the way it's portrayed. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is really a terrible term. Machines can augment the human at the loop. It can help us accelerate things that take us a long time to do manually, but not much more than that. The social sciences is something we often think of, well, that's that college or it's that college. But really, the process of resilient design is a science that incorporates both the physical, the biophysical, the engineering, and the social sciences. So this is where I would argue that universities like ours that hold programs and departments and capabilities like this, we really do represent the needs for a future resilient nation. So we're going to jump into the video now and go to the end.
Working with those 400 experts revealed that pouring through reams of details was only necessary when information of interest was identified. Using artificial intelligence, such identification becomes possible. The sheer size of the data ecosystem, the data ocean that we are drowning in, requires machine augmentation. The outputs of the framework are visualized through the mesoscale operational situational awareness intelligence composite, or MOSAIC. MOSAIC allows operators, analysts, and policy and decision makers to see the hidden signals in the noise. This not only provides for speed and breadth of processing, it produces actionable intelligence that is timely and credible. Where we can see the threats clearly, and where, over time, we can develop trends and predictive intelligence, which lets us detect, deter, deny, and disrupt our adversaries. Now, picture many versions of the algorithms running on multiple data sources. Across the intelligence, defense, and law enforcement enterprises. Coordinating data outputs, detected patterns, and evolving algorithms via the government cloud. Moving answers without moving original data. Many little signals previously lost in the noise, creating mosaics, and in turn painting an even broader understanding. At the speed of need. That's next. The processes you have just seen may seem aspirational. They are, however, not. Genetic algorithms were first introduced in 1960 as a form of machine learning. They've been used for many purposes, primarily in optimization and search problems. But it is only in the last decade or so that needed computational power and parallel processing capabilities emerged. Since 2017, 4 pilot programs have been successfully executed to validate the strategic intelligence framework and its supporting capabilities. The first confirmed that accessing multiple non-similar data sources simultaneously and running genetic algorithms against them in real time to predict future events was possible. Another, as was demonstrated in this video, proved that genetic algorithms can identify previously hidden correlations. A third, which continues to today, was the deployment of a semi-automated version of the algorithms and Mosaic on a northern border sector of the continental United States. So far, it has identified at least 3 previously hidden patterns of illicit activity, which triggered joint investigations at the local, state, and federal level. Finally, using hand-processed law enforcement and open-source information, a version of Mosaic identified irregular warfare and operational preparation of the environment occurring on domestic American territory. It revealed that our adversaries have been actively acting against us. Here, in our home. This changed U.S. national policy. Now is the time to reinvent how we do intelligence, to detect, deter, and disrupt our adversaries' efforts, and defend our nation. We have the means and the need.
Thanks. Thank you for driving that. And I can tell you that one of those activities that was undetected was the trafficking of wildlife. So it was something that simply did not rise to the level. And of course, the trafficking of wildlife, particularly in some areas, can be devastating to ecosystems that are already on the edge. The US has the luxury and the privilege of having some of the world's lion's share of wilderness, both capital W and little w wilderness. And so in this particular case, it was being exploited. So we were very proud to be able to assist with that. So I talked about how some of my colleagues, especially at the Department of Defense, are trying to bring the social sciences in, trying to design these futures, trying to build scenarios. And I just wanted to let everybody know that this is the program, the Minerva program with DoD. I do sit on that committee. And for the first time in a long time, we have been able to move forward with some effect. Next slide, please. The other thing that we have built over many years is a community of like-minded scientists. So here is the computational COMSES, a community for modeling and social ecological systems. This has been built with colleagues at Arizona State. It started out as just a small group of people in a room sitting on the ASU campus many years ago, back when I was in Alaska. It is now a global network of thousands of people, and I encourage you to visit it. It has something for everyone. Next slide, please. So ultimately, possibly some of you are thinking, defend the homeland, threats, adversaries, what are you talking about, Doc? But really it's about protecting freedom and freedom for everyone in a way that upholds our democracy. So the whole goal is to build a more resilient America. And academia must lead in the objective detection and characterization of a range of threats while ensuring that the privacy of Americans is protected. This was something in the design of that strategic intelligence framework was a pretty sticky wicket to get through. How do we move answers while not moving data? How do we ensure that academic freedom is protected while asserting that there are some types of programs that our nation needs for itself? How do we do it while protecting and ensuring that relationships are also kept sacred? These could be relationships and trust across different sectors. All of this while clearly objectively articulating the trade-offs and consequences of all of these dynamics. For everything, there is a trade-off, but those difficult dialogues have not yet been had in a way that is diverse for the nation. Next slide, please. So the recommendations to finish with is to use a scenarios-based approach to ensure that we have diverse geographies, that we have operator inputs. I work on a day-to-day basis with universities like the University of Maryland, like George Mason University, universities whose pipeline to the defense and security agencies are essentially open. And it's just automatic. But as a result, I am watching the diversity drop and the purported solutions not mapping to the kinds of futures that are unfolding. By bringing in more diverse geographies and more diverse voices in academia, i.e. universities like ours, we will address the drifting delta problem. And adaptation 3, it is really us who need to lead. We have to build the arguments. We have to break the business as usual. Our nation won't survive business as usual, but it's up to us to articulate why. Next slide, please. So closing with that slide of the universities whose pipelines are just open, I watch the same stuff recycle every day. But in the area you see in that yellow ellipse, we hold the lion's share of local and place-based knowledge that is intact and precise. We hold a type of innovation and human capital that is unprecedented because of the lack of infrastructure, because we have to innovate in this inland Pacific North and the inland American West. We have to innovate. Often we really don't have a choice. The proving grounds for climate change adaptation alone, I only put proving grounds for climate change adaptation in here. That alone is unprecedented in the nation because of the way we have a mix of developed, undeveloped, and wilderness areas. There is no other part of the nation, including Alaska, that has that. We are also the nation's natural resource cradle. So I will leave it there. I'll open it to any questions and hand it back to Kenton.
Thank you very much, Doc, for that informative and provocative presentation. And we've got a great audience reflecting a lot of diverse disciplines and viewpoints. And I'm hoping that some of them might have either a response or a question, and we've got a little more than 10 minutes. So let's open it up. And if the questioner would like to either just raise a hand on camera, unmute yourself, or put up a hand on Zoom, and we can welcome some response. So I might start by asking a little bit about your partnerships here on campus, in the community, in North Idaho and Eastern Washington. Who else have you been engaging on this larger question of Homeland Security defined in ways that perhaps we haven't thought of before?
So Kenton, that's a fantastic question. And Dean Shauna Corey is on here. She's up in with the perfect office that I covet. So really it's been working through CAA. And to be frank, one of the things that we have, I'm not going to say a problem or an issue here, is we ourselves are still a little old school about how we approach these problems. So I think we also have Andy Kliske, who's on here as well. I might get him to chime in as well. So we often go back to our roots, which is, let's look at the natural resources, or let's look at the governance structures, or let's look at this. And so we have our own biases, and quite often I get more purchase, ironically, at other institutions than I do here, except for the activities and actions of Shauna and Andy and others like them. For example, the University of Montana, Montana State have a number of programs that I was asked to participate in just recently to look at building out those proving grounds. When we think of proving grounds, we think of white sands or something to blow something up, but we really don't have a large scale climate change adaptation proving ground. So it's a very good question. The answer is beyond Dean Corey and Andrew Kliske, not much, and I'll see if either of them have any inputs.
Shauna or Andy, feel free to jump in and expand on what we've heard so far.
Sure, thank you. Great talk, Lil. Wonderful to see all this work kind of emerging into a single presentation here. I mean, we had different efforts, and we've certainly reached out, for example, to INL. We're yet to, I think, get traction there, but we're looking to try and build collaborations there. With the food, energy, water systems work, we, for example, have colleagues we work with in New Hampshire, in Alaska, in Southern Oregon, and then locally, a lot of that work was based out of Magic Valley, Twin Falls, and with a group of different water and energy and agricultural sector representatives from there. So yeah, we're within CALS. I think the extension network has been one of the sort of stronger avenues we've had for doing certainly some of that work.
Yeah, I think really in terms of what we need, where we need the nation to go, not a lot of purchase, but also haven't really brought it forward as centrally as maybe could be done. And also remember those biases, right? So we did go to CALS to talk about an agriculture security initiative, but because the research dairy was being built out, that sort of took precedent, and another university actually ended up taking on that initiative. So the one thing I can offer is that connectivity with federal partners quite a bit, and I think leveraging that a bit more would be good.
So I just want to jump in a little bit in terms of the concept of that's really exciting is when you look at all that blank space and you look at the universities that, you know, within the West, it looked like Colorado Springs, closest to us really, that's actually doing any work with Department of Defense. And when you think about the possibilities that it could exist in the West with so many different smaller universities, but universities that are very, I think, have a strong understanding of, like Lil suggested, place, but also just a strong understanding of the Western United States and what's happening here. And to me, if there's some way we could get groups of people to work together and go after a grant, but in a different way, not in the same way that the other universities back east are doing it, but in a different way that focuses on this approach, would be incredible. But I know Lil has been working on that and Andy's been working on that. How do we do that? Like, besides getting people to, you know, to join us, but are there any specific topics that you think would be really compelling for people right now?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at the, so I'm a member of the National Climate Assessment Team, the NCAT, and there is a very, very big question about what are some of the design practices and properties we do to move resources when broader infrastructure is compromised or goes down. And so this infrastructure idea is a really big one, and that links into some of the command and control issues, but it also comes down to how do we design landscapes themselves? How do we actually introduce landscape design that is resilient and multi-purposed? So for example, in Idaho, as all of you know, we have the easternmost inland port in the country. And there are a number of features in the state itself that a lot of people don't realize could be fallbacks for the defense and security enterprise. And I don't mean moving soldiers and guns and everything. I mean being able to fall back if something happens all the way from a black swan. And don't ignore the idea of black swans. And sadly, there are entities that would love to cause chaos within our own walls, within our own nation. Everything from the black swan to just a deterioration or to enhance things. So the idea of what is the very question that has not been answered is, what is a resilient landscape? That has not been answered yet. So just attacking that problem from an actual design and science perspective is something that is low-hanging fruit that we could do. The idea of building a futures foundry, the idea of being able to lead the nation in the design of these scenarios, and not just because that's work being done in CAA. This actually came up on another system. The question was, how do we create a futures foundry that helps us plan for a range of decisions that we make today? So those are two big areas. One thing that I have been sitting in the room and seen, so I'll give you an example. So we need a different way that we engage our congressional staff, and I think that's the right phrase, but our state and federal leaders. A lot of these efforts have been enabled because they've had somebody arguing for inclusion, for example, in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. We, in my opinion, and I know I'm on record saying this, I don't think we do a good job of that outside the usual wickets that we get pigeonholed into. So quite often I'm introduced as, you know, the gal from the University of Iowa or the girl from the University of Illinois. And, you know, it's like, yeah, the University of Iowa is doing great things, like Idaho. So I don't think we do a great job there. That's something that, you know, I really wish we could do differently through proper channels. But sorry, Sean, I went on there a bit.
We've got time for one question. If there's someone from the audience who has an observation, a response, or a query for our guest or for her dean.
I have stunned people into silence.
Well, if not, I will jump in and exercise the moderator's privilege of asking the last question. You put some wonderful resources up, some affiliated websites, and I'm wondering, are they linked from your own site or from the Center for Resilient Communities, or is there a way we could provide them to the audience? And secondly, I would love to see the film again, now that I have the context for it, and just watch it from start to finish. And if that link is available as well, I think our audience today would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That link is out there. I'm very proud of it. It was 4 years of heavy work, and yeah, I'm very proud of that. As to the links, I will say that our website, you know, I've learned, sadly, that quite a bit of what makes things work is the internet presence, the social media and everything. I don't like social media. I don't do it also for security reasons. But our website, I think, Andy, I will ask Andy, I think it has the links. If it doesn't, we'll put them on there. They're on, you know, our collaborators' websites. And we certainly do need to do a better job of our, you know, our website. But and I know Shauna has also said this as well, as that we just need to do better with our website. So yeah, if they aren't there, Kenton, I'll make sure they're in there.
Sean has just put the Vimeo link in for the film into chat. And I would encourage you to copy that or open it before the Zoom meeting ends. And we'll find a way to perhaps in the YouTube description of the video, I can include some links as well for people who want to go back. Andy is asking whether there's a passcode needed for the Vimeo. Sean, do you have the answer to that? I popped it right up, and it looks like I can play it with it.
It did at one stage. Okay, great.
So, all right, excellent. So, well, Doc, this has been a terrific way to kick off the semester. Thank you for bringing a variety of disciplines together and helping us see how they interact. And we wish you well as you continue to expand those partnerships. And as you said, it's often harder to get buy-in from your home community or campus than with partners elsewhere. But I hope this is a step towards engaging University of Idaho in different ways than you have in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Kenton.
And next week, I hope you can join us at this time, 12:30 on Tuesday, January 25th, when we'll hear from Joe Feldman, postdoctoral fellow at the Martin Institute, speaking about populism, progressive elites, and the notion of the caviar left in Peru. And that'll be the first of 3 presentations by the College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences Society of Fellows. And that will be a good way to learn about some of the work being done here on our campus. I again would like to invite the students in our INTR 450 class to stay online just for a minute after I formally adjourn the colloquium, and hope to see many of you next week.